So, welcome everybody. Another Lean Leaders Live, Meet the Speaker. Um, my name is Fabian. I'm working with Lean 42 as a consultant. And yeah, we have our conference in about a month now. It's the Lean Leaders Summit here taking place in Munich on July the 2nd and July the 3rd. And yeah, it's about IT strategy, CRO advisory. We have a lot of enterprise architects also, but also some additional very interesting topics. And that's why Veronique is here today with me. She's one of our speakers at the conference. And yeah, Veronique, great that you joined us. Let's hand
Yeah,
over to you for a quick introduction.
thanks for having me. So I'm Veroniek Vermeulen. I'm the founder of Silatha. I'm a engineer from background, but I have about 20 years experience in FMCG global marketing. And I think Silatha also is a product of that experience. Being in a very male-dominated world, where I always thought I fitted really well, until I realized I didn't. So it's interesting how you try to fit in so badly that you don't even realize that you're doing that. And that's how I set up to start Silatha.
Okay, great to hear. So, you already said you have a background in engineering. I read you worked a lot in global marketing, but now you moved on to your own company. Yeah, congratulations to that. But the topic is now psychological safety. So, what motivated you to do this kind of change or kind of further development in your career?
Yes, it's been a very personal story, I would say. So I think about 13 years ago now, I realized that I was mainly living according to what society demanded of me and not really true to my own beliefs. Maybe it's that the engineering brain, but it wasn't that well connected with my emotions, and so. Um, it's almost ridiculous right now when I say this, but I didn't really know what I wanted and what I really wanted from my life, and that became a journey that also led me to many monasteries, where I meditated, and where I mainly connected more to my inner self and my emotions. And through that, I started to open up more, and I opened up to my friends who told about elements in their life they were going through, and I absolutely had no idea that this was even a thing.
Mhm.
Things like endometriosis. I don't know if you know what endometriosis is, but it's when 10% of women, when they have their periods, they have extreme pain. So it's really different than most of women. Um, but I never heard of it. The details of menopause, but also fertility journeys. There were so many things that opened up, and I realized, like, how can we live in a society where I've never heard this, even though I'm a woman myself, and 51% of the planet is female. And that is what kind of sparked also to better understand these topics, opening up about these topics. And what opening up really gave me is very beautiful relationships. And I felt less alone myself, because even though some things were different, we could really support each other and be there for each other. And I realized how important that is in life, because in the end we spend a lot of time in a workplace, and it's not about opening up to everyone about everything, but being your authentic self and being your true self is really important, to create a more authentic workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, good that you mentioned already some very precise aspects like endometriosis. Yeah, I once had an employee also with that kind of problems, and then I wasn't told about it before. I learned it kind of on the job, what could happen and how to handle it, and maybe what to do. Yeah. So psychological safety. We all know about workplace safety. So as an employer, also I need to take care that whatever, there's enough light in the office and no sharp edges and nobody falls down a step and so on. So I think this is rather clear. Even if you're in the office, there's more to do if you have work in a factory or a workshop or whatever, or outside. Yeah. So, but what is, you already mentioned some of the aspects, but generally speaking, psychological safety, what is it about?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that, because it's really, well, in one hand, we know we need to take care of our safety when it comes to physical safety. But it's even more important to be psychological safe. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is. Basically, it means that you feel safe to take interpersonal risks. So that means that you dare to speak up about ideas or questions that you have, concerns, or even mistakes that you made, without being afraid of the negative consequences. So if you make a mistake, there's no humiliation, there's no punishment. You can freely speak up about these elements, and you know that people will listen, and then together you look for a solution. Or when you have, so it's not about being nice or avoiding conflict. That's often misunderstood, like, oh, I just need to accept everything. It's definitely also not just saying whatever you want. It's really about having respectful communication with each other, where there's an openness and trust to each other. So you can really express yourself and be your authentic self. So what that means also is that people would open up about ideas they have. We as humans, we tend to fit in, like I did. So even if there's they did research, for example, giving a very simple question. If 5 people before you would give the wrong answer, we start to doubt ourselves, and we might also give that wrong answer, even though we know it's not correct. So when you create a psychological safe space, you dare to speak up and say, I'm not sure about this idea. Like, you give your real thoughts about it. And that also means that innovation can be truly enhanced. In workplaces that are psychologically safe, there is way more innovation, but also the overall team performance is going up because people are actually properly communicating with each other and taking that risk, because they know it's not promoting for people to make mistakes, but if they did, you want to know about it, right? So it actually is a very obvious way that you build more trust in the organization. There's more engagement from employees. You reduce stress because people are not in their head all the time worrying that if they would say this, they might be punished for it. And that is why it's such an important element. And that's also why companies will profit so much more if they would really embrace psychological safety.
Yeah, I think that's also an important aspect, what you mentioned, to say, okay, it's not something which as a company I have to do, I have to provide, I have to invest in something, whatever it is, time, material or so, but I also get something back from it usually. Yeah, people are more engaged, people are more focused on the work, they feel more comfortable, they maybe do better work. Yeah, and so it's also profitable for the company.
Exactly.
Yeah, you already said, you have an engineering background, which is quite interesting. Did it help you to promote psychological safety, or how did it influence it? Or was it nothing at all? It didn't influence it at all.
Maybe what I could take from the engineering background is you make mistakes, right? Failing forward, and
Okay.
making a mistake in learning opportunity, but I think it's mainly been my personal story that made me realize that this is so important in life. And in the end, if we look also at happiness, it's about being connected with other people. And you get the best out of your people when they feel comfortable. So it was more my personal journey rather than the engineering background, because I must say within the engineering world, talking about emotions isn't a real um, obvious thing. Although I also don't want to give a misperception that psychological safety is all about emotions. It's also really about smart ideas that you might hide, or mistakes that are made that are not shared. And so yeah, I don't think there's a direct connection to the engineering background,
Mhm.
but I believe whichever industry you are, it would be important to really embrace psychological safety.
So at the Lean Leader Summit, yeah, uh, next month, there will be a talk of yours about great psychological safety in the workplace. Yeah. So you already shared some insights, and we don't want to have all the content of the talk here, but maybe it's another key aspect or key insight you want to share now from your talk.
Yes, I definitely will not give everything away, but maybe I can mention two things that
Good.
might
Yeah.
inspire people to learn more. And I would say the first one is a number that Gallup recently reported in their State of the Global Workplace report. And it's a very shocking number that within Europe, the engagement of employees is only 13%.
Mhm.
Like I can almost not believe it, so low. It's globally it's 21%, but we operate in Europe, and that means that most of your employees are in the workplace and are basically not being as productive as they could be. And creating psychological safety has a huge influence on engagement of people. So if you want to have more engagement, definitely come to the talk. And there's another element to it, which is the cost that it brings. We already discussed this shortly at the beginning. We made an estimation that companies are losing 31 million a year for every 1,000 employees by not being psychologically safe. And so I think leaders should realize how much money they are losing um, on a daily basis. We're so focused on our business and reducing cost and getting the best people, but then we don't get the best out of our people. And that's such a waste of money. So maybe those are two little hints to come and hear more.
Okay, great. Um, Maybe another aspect we didn't touch so far, not very deeply at least, not very in detail. Are there any common obstacles or hurdles when you want to start with psychological safety or want to kind of introduce that concept? We'll learn in your talk how to do that, I think, yeah. But what might be some common obstacles or hurdles? You already said one, I think. People, management, whoever is focused on the daily work, getting things done, stressed out with all the tasks to do. Yeah, economy isn't going that good. There's these problems, that problem. So we all stuck within our kind of a daily routine. This is, of course, a hurdle or an obstacle. But what might be another one you want to share, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. I would say psychological safety starts with the leadership. And when there is no trust, then there's no psychological safety, because you open up, right? You show something that you're not certain of, you sharing an idea that you're not sure is going to be liked. You open up about a mistake you made, or you show your vulnerability. And if there's a fear that this will be punished, then people will not. And most of the time, it's the leadership that has to show that this is a place where you are trusted and where you can speak up. And so it's important that the leadership really builds that trust and shows trust. And also that the leadership is opening up themselves and show their vulnerability. You can say to all your employees, you can say whatever you want, and you can, but if you never as a leader admit your mistakes, we all make mistakes, right? And
Sure.
it really helps when a leader is sharing that and said, I made this mistake, and now we're going to fix it. And it's shows that everyone is human, and they don't want to blame the circumstances or other people. They just take it on them and show, well, this is how people are, and I learned from it, and this is what I learned, and this is what I will do to fix it. So trust is really important. Being an example, having good communication. Often, as you say, people are so busy in their daily work that communication sometimes is very poor, and messages might be misunderstood or not truly expressed. And that also can erode trust and therefore psychological safety. So having a clear framework, having clear feedback loops where you take the time to understand each other, and why, like, that you are allowed to bring up something that troubled you, that worries you. Making time in that busy schedule is important to do that. And then, yes, of course, one of the things that we always see is that change is difficult. Most people don't like change. And so this might then also be a barrier within an organization, because they don't dare that showing up for who they are is really, really safe in that environment. And of course, we have our unconscious biases, and there are microaggressions that also might not help in how people are seen and trusted and really valued. So I think all of these elements come together. And if you want to overcome these hurdles, have your leadership really show up for who they are, and foster trust, showing their vulnerability, and really promote open communication. And you can only do that when, as a leader, you also have open communication. And then making sure there are good feedback loops within the organization, so that over time, more and more psychological safety can be built.
Okay, maybe quickly one last aspect before we finish. It's you mentioned change, and of course, taking or introducing psychological safety, aspects of psychological safety is kind of a change. But also, what I heard from some CIOs recently is, okay, we are doing a big change, and for that, we are introducing psychological safety to help us do our big change or big transformation. So is this something you already encountered, to say, okay, it helps us to change when people can speak out freely, to just put it plain and simple?
Yes, I love that question, because companies are in change pretty much all the time. And sometimes we also hear, like, it's not the right time because we are letting go of 1,000 people, or this is like all this change is coming, and so we only want to focus on that. Whereas it's the most crucial time to make sure that people trust and feel safe to speak up. And so, absolutely, when companies are in a time of change, making sure that there's psychological safety, is super important, and leaders can really also show that by what I just mentioned, really showing up for who they are, and foster trust within the organization, because you will see that that change will move more smooth. You maybe in the beginning you feel, when people speak up, you think, oh my god, now it's getting harder and tougher. And in the end, it really helps, because the worries that people have are still there. So whether you communicate them or they speak up about them, or not, they will be there. So it's better to really tackle them from the beginning on, and take these worries within the whole change. And so in the end, the change that you are facing will go faster and smoother, and everyone will be happier, meaning that your employees that you want to keep, your talent, will actually stay in the organization. And that is key for when you move on with your new changed organization.
Yeah, I think that's it for today. Veronique, thanks a lot for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to meet you in person at our Lean Leaders Summit, beginning of next month in July. For everybody who's seeing this, there are still some tickets left, so you can register for our summit and meet us in Munich on July the 2nd and July the 3rd. So thanks, Veronique, and see you at the conference with your talk.
Yes, very much looking forward to that.